You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to the first DCAU review of 2020. It's a brand new decade. I'm your host, Liam, and with me, as always, is your other host, Cal. And Cal, it's a new year, a new decade, and we've got a new show. Well, not a new show, but a show different than what we were talking about last month to talk about.
That's right. New month, new show, new year, new me, same story, same universe. Yes, that's right, Liam. As we mentioned on last week's episode, we are starting the month of January, the new decade off, with a trip back to the future.
The future, Cal?
That's right. Well, we did this bit already, but that's right. We're back in the world.
And we'll do it again, don't you worry.
Forever. For the three people that get the Conan O'Brien bit from 1996 that we do every single time. It's great. It's part of why we're so great here at the DCAU Review.
Yeah.
Just comedy gold like that. Yes, back to what we're talking about. We're in the world of Batman Beyond. Future Gotham is here, and we are talking about the next episode of Batman Beyond in order on the DVDs, and that would be Hidden Agenda. I feel so old talking about DVDs because everything is streaming now, but this is how we do things here. So
yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, anytime we talk about, videotapes or something like that really make you feel old, but yeah, even DVDs now feel so archaic.
That's right. Oh, this isn't Blu-ray? No, we haven't chilled out for the Blu-ray just yet.
No, not yet. Although I hear the HD remakes of seasons 2 and 3 are coming soon to the DC Universe streaming service.
Oh,
which again, we're not paid to promote, but we absolutely would be if it was on the table.
If anybody can get us the hookup to be paid to promote that, we would just talk. Seriously, we'd talk about it all day and night because it's just so good.
Yeah, just
all the original content that's provided on there at a low price.
Yes, introducing great for fans of old, young, and middle-aged alike.
An entire DC catalog at your fingertips.
Again, not paid to promote, but want to be.
Yes. Anyway, but yes, this week's episode is Hidden Agenda, Liam, and this is a exciting episode because it introduces the character of Max and to the Batman Beyond world, who becomes a very, very important character throughout the rest of the series.
Absolutely, and so we will get into the plot and our big picture thoughts on the whole episode. But before we do, Cal, as I do every week, I have in fact copy and pasted the IMDb synopsis for this episode into my notes, and I shall read them in my best dramatic voiceover voice.
Please and thank you.
And this is for the episode, as you mentioned, Cal, Hidden Agenda, which was written by Hilary J. Bader and Sean McLaughlin, and directed by Kurt Gaeta, and that synopsis reads as such. A girl genius finds herself unaccountably harassed by Jokerz at school, and she begins to suspect that Terry is responsible.
Oh.
Which is actually a darn good one, as far as what the actual plot of this episode is.
Spot on.
As we introduce it as they're getting, it's not the SATs, Cal, it's the GATs.
What do you think the G stands for, Liam?
Gotham, I guess, but I don't know, the Gotham aptitude tests.
Okay.
Like, if you get a low enough score, you're like, well, you have to go work for the Riddler. like maybe that's it. It's like, you're the future criminals of this city, which, like, all right, well, you got a high score, you can work for Mr. Freeze. Oh, you got a low score, you got to work for Croc.
Right.
Or in this case, it would be like Spellbinder and Ink, I guess, or something, but...
Yeah.
But, I'm not sure what the G stands for, but they're comparing scores. Of course, Terry, who is never at school due to his being Batman, has an incomplete grade on it, but their friend Max, who I believe we saw in the background of one or two other episodes before here.
Yeah, I believe so.
But this is the big official introduction of her as, like, the main cast, as you mentioned. And she got the perfect score, and has, in fact, somewhat drawn the ire of Captain... I don't know, he has the Letterman jacket, so I assume he's a jock, and also a very smart boy named Carter Coleman, who thought he was on track to being the valedictorian, but in fact, with this perfect GAT score, Max has knocked him out of that spot. We see Carter being berated by his mother for getting an A-.
I would use the word scolded. I don't know if it was berated. I feel like she would yell. She was doing that subtle thing that all parents do. It
was a very Lucille Bluth way of tearing down.
The character looks like Lucille Bluth too,
True,
so we'll talk about that in visuals. But yeah, it was a very backhanded, and it's a tired trope that the jock who is clearly very smart and has the parents. I don't know. Maybe this is real world and there are certain parents, but you can't get away from this character in any teen drama. There's always the parent who expects absolute perfection from their child and is disappointed in anything less than.
Right. And so and then also we find out, because the episode actually starts, we should mention, with the Jokerz and their new leader, Terminal, harassing this guy on the elevator subway, and Batman intervenes just as he's about to die. But so we find out very quickly that Carter Coleman is in fact this Terminal, and so he and the Joker spend most of the episode just sabotaging and vandalizing Hamilton Hill High.
Do you think Terminal, because the Jokerz spelled the Jokerz with the Z, is that spelled a special way? Like is it
the T is a 7 or something?
Yeah.
maybe so. We never see it typed out, so we can't be sure. He's really only referred to as Terminal once, I think, in the episode, but it's clear he's the kind of the new Joker's boss, and
well, at least for this sect.
Yes, although I don't think we ever see him again. We see him in like some comics, and actually he's been brought back very recently in the Batman Beyond Rebirth comics, so he's been around in other media, but as far as on the show, I'm pretty sure this is his one and only appearance. But anyway, he's in charge of this chapter of the Joker gang, and he is basically just using his gang to get revenge on Max in whatever way he can, which is mostly, it seems, just blowing up computers and spray painting lockers. And he does try. They do like leave a spring-loaded pie with a brick in it inside her locker. But other than that, it's just they're just kind of generally harassing her. And meanwhile, we find out that Max has this algorithm that she's running to try to figure out who Batman is.
Because she's a genius.
Because yes, she's very smart. And then once the Jokerz start attacking the school, she decides to rework the program and have it try to figure out who the Jokerz could be in the school. And what name would pop up on that list, Cal, but one Terry McGinnis.
Oh, man. What are the chances this computer program thinks that Terry is a Joker?
Yeah, she had it close. But, from there, it's just kind of she accuses Terry of being a Joker. She runs away. She runs afoul of she writes a letter to Terry telling him that she's going to expose his secret if he doesn't meet her. It's not really explained how the Jokerz knew she and Terry were going to be at the fountain in the park or whatever.
She just had a string of bad luck and picked the one fountain where the Jokerz decided to hang out.
Right, and there's a brief fight with her and Batman, and we see that she actually has some chops herself. She's in any way a damsel in distress, as she actually goes right in and fights the Jokerz along with Batman, and then it's discovered that Carter is in fact Terminal, and from there we get a little kind of epilogue where we find out that she does in fact realize that she did realize that Terry was leading a double life, but that in fact he was Batman and not a member of the Jokerz, and that's sort of the ending. It feels like a real, like, this is designed to be like the new, like a soft relaunch of the entire show almost, because of how much this is focused on the high school characters.
Agreed. Yeah, we mentioned that before, just briefly before we started going live here. But yeah, it's interesting. This episode does not feature Bruce Wayne at all. There's no Bruce. Not even a voice over the comm link.
Right.
100% Terry. It's all based. Everything happens at Hamilton Hill High. Everything happens there. There's vandalism there. You see more of the school than you have in past episodes. So yeah, it's a very interesting, and I think we read up that there's at least a rumor or speculation that the network had asked for a pivot away from the sort of dark overtones of the original first season and sort of geared towards the teenage crowd, and to have a very, for lack of a better term, Spider-Man-esque, at least like young Spider-Man-esque type idea, Terry's trials and tribulations at Hamilton Hill. And this feels like, that's the direction of this. This wouldn't be out of place, and don't get me wrong, I'm by no means slamming any of them, but this would not be out of place in one of the many, many WB or CW dramas in the late 90s and early 2000s. It just kind of fits that.
This could be an episode of Riverdale.
Yeah.
It was just missing Sexy Archie.
I was just waiting for you to drop the Sexy Archie bomb. I know that's one of your favorites. Yeah, so I guess we get into our plot scores here. I didn't love the episode. I think that introducing more Joker's characters was good. Flesh out those characters a little bit. I think it was interesting that they went the route of not keeping the Joker Terminal's identity a secret, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad choice, but I think there would have been more tension as to who it was. However, by introducing a brand new character, that always sticks out as a sore thumb, unless you're doing a red herring type thing where you think it's supposed to be this person, but it's actually this other person that we just introduced. So maybe if they had introduced this character Wilson before, what's his first name? Carter Wilson before, then maybe it would have been, oh, well, now he's a Joker, but he wasn't. It's a brand new character for this episode, had not been previously introduced. Didn't really care about him, didn't really care that he was a Joker. It's hard to care about Max yet because she's sort of a brand new character also. Max is also close to discovering Terry's identity, which you're not rooting for. Why would you want somebody that you don't know is a good person to find out Terry's identity? I mean, it works out in the end, and you kind of get now Terry has an ally. Also, can we talk about the fact that Max is going to be willingly complicit in the Terry Worst Boyfriend in the World award?
Yeah, so Terry, the biggest jerk in the world, didn't even bother to tell Dana why he no-showed their date the night before. This is
50 years from now. He couldn't send a text.
Right, an email. They talk
FaceTime.
about email a lot in this. They have video phones. We saw that in this episode. He FaceTimed her. No, just didn't tell her what was going on, because obviously in real life we know he was being Batman, but he doesn't tell her that. So as far as she knows, he has once again no-showed their date for what we can only assume is the octillionth time. And
but never fear, Max will be complicit.
Right. And now she's helping him be a terrible boyfriend to her by saying that, oh, I was supposed to babysit Terry's little brother, but I had to cancel. Again, why wouldn't Terry just say, because if I was Dana now, I'd be like, oh, Max and Terry are having an affair.
Right, exactly. Right, that's my first thought. It's like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Wait, how do you know that he had to, why
are you covering for him, and why didn't you text me and tell me that?
Right.
This is all still very shady, but poor Dana. # Dana deserves better.
She really does. Forever.
But anyway, yeah. So overall, I guess we can get into our scores here, Cal. Like I said, I think it's an interesting episode. I think the idea of Terry being concerned, the mix of it, he's concerned that his identity might be exposed, but he's also concerned for his friend's well-being. And I wish they had played a little bit more into that side of it. But everything's kind of touched on in a very surface level way that I think, and part of that's, again, maybe that's the time constraints of a 22-minute cartoon, but regardless, I went with a 6 out of 10 for plot.
I went very similarly. That's a tough word to say. I went 5 out of 10. It's an okay episode, but there's not one thing that's great in the episode, in my opinion. Nothing stands out as oh, that was great. The fight sequence at the end between the Jokerz and Terry and Max is the best part of the episode, in my opinion. But the stakes don't ever feel like there's... I mean, Terminal has a gun. That's the only reason why the stakes feel any higher than normal.
Why Batman isn't just immediately wiping the floor with all of these guys.
Right, exactly. Especially when we've seen him take on the big slapper guy by himself.
Right.
And
the splicer monster,
right.
All that stuff.
It's it's a teenager with a gun. Really, this is giving you a hard time. You got to have Max help you with that.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not great. I appreciate them introducing the character of Max, who definitely becomes a much more tolerable and I think, from my recollection, an enjoyable character later on, certainly as an ally. And but, yeah, I think for not really fleshing this out and really the stakes not feeling ever high, great at all, and really feeling conflicted because you're really not rooting for Terry's identity to be exposed to anybody, let alone a character that they sort of are just fleshing out.
Right.
I gave it a 5 out of 10, very middle of the road for this episode.
I think that's fair. Moving on from here, Cal, we will move on to our second category, which is visuals and animation. I guess we can start off. There are brand new Jokerz designs. These are all new for this episode as far as I can remember. It's a whole new cast, as we mentioned. I like the terminal design. You said it was very Marilyn Manson. Mm-hmm. And I like that design of that, or the Misfits, or something like that. But the sort of the goth clown, I thought that was a unique take, because most of the other Jokers either look like they're cosplaying as Harley or Joker. Mm-hmm. So seeing like a completely different take on a Joker gang, I think was fun. And the other Jokers in the group were cool too. It's just a guy in like a red jester costume, and then the girl with she has the pigtails and the big red cheeks and stuff like that. So I thought the Joker's designs were cool. As you mentioned, though, in plot, other than that, there's not much action in this episode. There's a kind of a cool scene where Batman is chasing the Jokers. The Jokers are on motorcycles, and Batman's in the Batmobile. That's kind of a fun sequence, but I just didn't feel like and as you mentioned, the final scene's not that exciting, so visuals were kind of a weird one for me to grade here.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. There's no bad visuals. Nobody looked off model. I think if anything, people looked on model, although they did that weird thing where Terry's upper lip was highlighted again for a lot of the episode. But I don't think. Max as a character is great, and her pink hair is supposed to make her look visually interesting.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot that stands out for her, and she kind of looks the same from my recollection going forward.
Right.
So that she's a newer character. The stuff in the school, if you want to comment on the fact that they were sort of correct in predicting that there were going to be these giant computer screens everywhere, certainly in schools going forward.
Sure.
And there's giant computers in every classroom and stuff from nowadays in high schools, or in most high schools, I should say. But regardless, there wasn't a whole lot visually interesting. The Batmobile does make an appearance, as you mentioned, in that chase scene. So there was some cool cool to see the Batmobile make an appearance. But really, other than that, and maybe in the opening scene with the Jokers unleashing these killer dentures, the chattering teeth,
but with they all have fangs, basically.
That was a neat visual, and certainly a neat tool, and a sort of a play on the old Joker. Joker usually had some of those in a gimmick or two. So that was a cool play on that old trick, but not a whole lot interesting here visually. So I just went with a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm right in that same ballpark. I went 7 out of 10. Like I said, I think it's good. It's fine. There's nothing, there's nothing super stand out about any of the actual action other than that Batmobile scene. But certainly not a bad visual episode by any standards.
Yeah. And
moving on from there, Cal, we will talk about our third category, which is music. And the music in this episode was done by the legend Shirley Walker. That being said, there was not a lot of noticeable music in this episode, and part of that maybe is because it's such a character-driven story. They let the music hang back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there's some, other than in those couple of fight scenes, and there's sort of some good atmospheric moments when Max is walking through the empty school at night, and then the music kind of swells when the robot janitor devices are shooting acid at her before Batman swoops in to save her. But I didn't really notice I had very little to say about music, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah,
there's some tension building music in the scene where she's there at the high school at night, and they flash back when the Joker's gang tells Batman that they left their leader back at the high school. So there's some tension building music there, and certainly with like you said, with the janitor robots that are going to shoot acid at Max, which is not a sentence that I thought I would ever say, I think. But and I think the final battle scene between the Jokers and Batman and Max has some good solid Batman Beyond music. It's not. There's certainly nothing memorable about it. It's just sort of your basic rock guitars in the background playing, from my recollection. But yeah, nothing super exciting. Which it's not bad, but we've talked about it before, how there are episodes like this that are maybe middle of the road, or the plot isn't so great, and the score is brought up because there is music that allows it to, almost become a part of the story, or brings that interest level up, making it more memorable. So again, nothing terrible in this episode, but nothing stood out. So I went with a 5 out of 10.
And I am in that same exact range, as I also gave it a 5 out of 10. Reminder, we never discuss our scores before we go on the air. It just kind of happens to work out most of the time.
There you go.
And that will bring us to our final category, Cal. We have, of course, voice acting to talk about. Not a big cast this week. We do have some minor players who obviously play like the Jokerz, like Omar Gooding, who I believe has already done some voices on the show as the male Joker. That's not Terminal. But then the two big, one becoming, I guess, part of our main cast now is Cree Summer as Max Gibson, who's, I mean, I think you know her voice. If you've watched maybe more than one cartoon in your life, you've probably heard her voice. So I think she's really good as Max, though, because I think of her in a lot of roles. She does a very boisterous, like over the top character that yells and is real silly. And here she's very toned down and is and that plays to the character. I think is that she's supposed to be like really cool and smart and doesn't take no crap from anybody. And I think she does a good job. The other notable voice actor in this episode, besides obviously, as we mentioned, there is no Kevin Conroy in this episode. Will Friedle does a fine job as Terry McGinnis. Mm-hmm. We also have Lauren Tom as Dana. # Dana deserves better. But the main voice actor, as far as villains go this week, playing Terminal / Carter, it's a little unknown. Well, I mean, he's really not a known actor. Speaking of the WB. It's, in fact, Michael Rosenbaum. And it's weird. We've talked about this in other episodes before. Heart of Ice comes to mind, where Mark Hamill plays
Ferris Boyle.
Thank you. And obviously, at the time that he recorded that voice, he hadn't been cast as the Joker yet. So it's not... And he's not bad as that character, but you know who it is, and it's weird to hear him do a voice that is the voice you know him as. Yep. And it's the same kind of thing here with Michael Rosenbaum, where, yes, he played this role before he was the Flash, but you know him as the Flash, and he doesn't really do like an overt different voice. Like when he voices Ghoul and does his Christopher Walken or his Deadshot, which is now retroactively problematic Kevin Spacey impression. Here it's basically just Michael Rosenbaum doing his normal voice, maybe a little bit like raspier or toned down, but he sounds like the Flash, and Agreed. That's kind of weird.
Agreed, and not only that, but he does not sound like a teenage boy, which is who he's supposed to be playing here. Right. He sounds like a 30-year-old man. And with the character design that they did for Terminal, which we've touched on briefly as a cool design, but it's also visually similar enough to Ghoul because they both have that single colored skin with a black around the eyes. Mm-hmm. And they're both Jokerz. Yes. Mind you.
Both voiced by Michael Rosenbaum.
Yeah. So is there some sort of fan theory out there that Terminal is actually Ghoul? We talked about that?
I will say that Ghoul's real name has Carter somewhere in it.
It's
interesting.
Like
his middle name or something.
Interesting.
So
okay.
It could be like his cousin, his little brother or something.
Both named Carter.
That's something that could be explored in future Batman Beyond comics or something.
There we go. Hey, regardless, visually it's a little bit distracting, like you said. And Michael Rosenbaum does a great voice. We've talked about before the fact that he's a good voice actor. His Flash is different than his Ghoul or his Deadshot or his, or anybody else that he plays.
Right.
Who else he plays? We talked about this, Dr. Polaris, I believe, right? His Dr. Polaris even. So that there's always a different nuance to it, and this is, like you said, just sort of him talking is him. He does not sound like a 16-year-old boy. And
sounds like Lex Luthor from Smallville.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't do a bad job. I just think that retroactively, like you said, it's difficult to not hear, it's any of these other characters when you're watching it. So maybe just maybe they in the future, if they are doing any more DCAU or take this advice from me, DC execs. Maybe don't cast the same guy 5 or 6 times in the same for different roles in your next shared universe, because this could become problematic when there are 2 young men doing a show reviewing your cartoon 20 years in the future.
Yeah, that's definitely a little bit distressing. That being said, like I said, so in what otherwise might have been a very strong voice acting category, it made it, like I said, very hard for me to rate, because hearing that such a familiar voice in not a familiar role kind of threw me off. So I kind of split the difference. I went 7 out of 10 for voice acting. Like I said, I think everyone is good. Generally, I like Cree Summer as Max. I think Will does a fine job as Terry in this episode, although, again, he doesn't have a ton to do, because it's mostly just him reacting to whatever's going on with Max and Terminal. So, I mean, I think it's good, but like I said, that distracting bit took my score down, certainly.
Yeah, I went 6 out of 10. I would say that the best performance comes in that final scene, the sort of the epilogue, where Terry and Max are discussing, and it's funny because Terry tells Max that this program that she had designed that figured out who Batman was, essentially, or narrowed down who Batman could have been, has already been wiped out because Bruce has already taken care of it.
Yeah.
But that scene, that sort of discussion piece between the two of them, and then even though I totally and wholeheartedly disagree with their, collusion in deciding to pull the wool over Dana's eyes, because Dana deserves better, as we all know.
Hashtag.
Yep. She, the back and forth where she says not to call her Robin and he calls her Alfred, I thought was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty witty. It was a good little turn there, because that naturally the fans at the time, and certainly anybody that's watching, it's like, oh, she's going to become Robin because she wears yellow and black and has pinkish reddish hair. Oh, they're laying the groundwork for Robin. She's like, nope, I'm not going to be Robin.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I gave it, in case I didn't mention, I gave voice acting a 6 out of 10.
Very good, and that will bring us to our final scores here, Cal. I have I don't know, the score feels a little harsher because I don't think we hated this episode as we talked about. There's certainly some good there, but my final score was a 25 out of 40.
Mine is on the lower scale of things too. Totaling everything up comes out to 22 out of 40. So just a tad lower than you had scored. And it's interesting because as I was thinking about this episode, and I guess we can talk about rewatchability, I don't know. This isn't mandatory viewing. Yeah. This is one of those that falls into the if you got an extra 22 minutes and want to watch it, because it does further, it sort of resets the tone, as we said, because if you start watching season 1 and then you just jump to the middle of season 2, you're going to be very confused by the tone. And the like, if you went from watching the original, the Mr. Freeze and the Meltdown episode, and then you jump to Egg Baby, you're going to be like, this is not the same show.
Right.
So you're right. I think this is a good launching point for that kind of reset of the tone and certainly the things that are covered in the topics and the idea behind the show. But with that said, I don't know that it's mandatory viewing.
No, I mean, obviously it is, like we said, it's not the official first appearance. It is Max's first episode where she's focused on. But it's not as if you can't really pick up the 2 or 3 plot points you need from this going forward. If you see Max in another episode, she's smart, she's good with computers, and she knows that Terry is Batman. That's kind of all you need to know. So if you know those things, you could probably skip this one and not have a problem. But like we've mostly said here, it's not a terrible episode or anything. It's not like, oh, never watch this again. It's certainly not going in the bad episode jar.
It's not a bad episode. It's not a skip it, but it's not a you need to rush out and see this episode immediately.
And one final thing we forgot to mention in visuals, I just wanted to mention, is that at one point Matt, Terry's brother, comes into the room playing with toy spaceships, and one of them happens to be Baby Kal-El's rocket ship from Last Son of Krypton Part 1.
That was a neat little Easter egg that you picked up on. You're like, that ship looks like Kal-El's, and sure enough, it is.
Yeah.
So, a little inside Easter egg joke there for him.
Yeah, that was cool. And that will bring us to the end of the show. Thank you for listening so much. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us both at the same handle, at DCAU Review, on those sites. I will always be tweeting about the next episodes we'll be reviewing, other things going on in the world of DC and animation. Same with our Instagram. And, of course, head to our website at DCAUreview.com if you're a newer listener to our show. First of all, thanks. Second of all, be sure to check out our archives where Cal has it broken down by category. If you want to hear all our Batman Beyond episodes, if you want to hear episodes about certain villains or characters, it's broken down real easy. You can find what you're looking for very quickly. So that will wrap us up here. Until next week, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.